The first thing to focus on when setting up for a back squat is simply the bar placement on the upper back. In this case, the most important thing is making sure that that bar is actually resting somewhere along at least the top of the rear delts, and the bar can actually go as low as the bottom of the rear delts, but we at least want it between the top of the rear delts and the traps. You're then going to pull the bar down with the hands as if you're trying to bend the bar in front of the chest. And the grip width can actually be highly variable, but you want it to be as narrow as possible without feeling discomfort in the shoulder or forcing the rib cage to pop up. In general, you want to visualize this as being no greater than 60 degrees, but you really won't be able to measure this. In this case, I have my arms at a 30-degree angle, and this represents what a 60-degree angle would look like with my similar arm width, which is pretty wide. So if you're that wide, you probably do want to try to get a little bit of stretching in. A common mistake in placing the bar on the back is really simply setting it, for one, far too high up on the neck. You don't want that bar actually resting on the neck at all. The upper back being loose, not creating any tension into the bar, and having an uneven grip along the bar. When unracking the bar for the squat, you want to get the hips underneath of the bar and then take 2 to 3 steps back to find your foot position, which should be anywhere from under the hips to just outside of the shoulders. So you can see that here. I have my feet roughly under the hips, which is a fairly narrow squat, but it can again be highly variable to just outside of those shoulders. So from the side, we want to think about our body's position relative to the weight and the joints that are involved in the squat. So when we are squatting with the barbell, the spine is stable, and the involved mobile joints include the hip joint, which can be thought of as articulating the movement at the hip joint and the femur. We then also have the knee joint, which can be thought of as articulating movement at the femur and the tibia or fibula. We then have, of course, the ankle joint, which we all obviously can see as thinking of articulating movement at the tibia and fibula and the foot. So those are the 3 moving joints. Everything else should remain relatively stable. Again, there's a common misconception that you want to keep the torso totally upright in order to not lift with the back, but you actually want to have the back stable relative to the hip joint. So we'll kind of look at that. In order to start your squat, take a big belly full of air, contract the muscles of the upper back by pulling the bar down into the body, and brace with the abs and the muscles of the lower back across both sides of the spine. And then we're going to break at the knees and the hips, forcing the knees forward and driving the hips back to the same degree. This will allow us to hit a strong bottom position with the bar roughly over the foot. So again, here we can think of the position of the body relative to the bar. So we can see that the torso has created an angle, which is okay. It doesn't have to be, it can't really be upright, but that should approximate the angle of the lower leg. We can see that if the torso was totally upright, that would place the bar too far behind the foot and actually cause us to tip over. Now you may notice that this torso angle approximates the angle that you'll see in a front squat, where the bar actually is placed in front of the body, as it would look like right here. But in this case, we are focused on that stable spinal position relative to the hip. So on the way up, focus on driving the feet through the floor and bringing the hips to the bar. Common mistakes include collapsing onto the quads and not letting the hips get involved, causing the bar to drift too far forward. Another common mistake includes not letting the knees get involved or trying to use only the hips, and that creates a weak position for the quads. A third very common mistake is to let the hips shoot up independently of the chest by not using the glutes well enough to drive the hips through to the bar early on in the squat. Back to the front view, we can see that foot placement again, and we want to have the foot at roughly a 45-degree angle relative to an imaginary line drawn through the floor. We're going to drive the knees out, but do not simply think of driving the knees out, but focus on pushing the hips out. And this will allow you to utilize the glutes properly during the squat. And during these squats, you're going to see that the knees are driving back in at the same rate and to the same degree as they drove out. Now, a common mistake when doing the squat is to have the toes facing too far forward and not letting the knees come out at all or come out very little. And then another common mistake is on the way down to properly drive the knees out, but to let the legs cave in excessively on the way up.